Hello, everyone. We will switch things around a bit this week. The lecture is being recorded by me right now for you to listen at your convenience later. And the class later today, Tuesday, will be used for a follow-up of the tutorial last Friday. I gather that there wasn't enough time to discuss all the questions you had prepared. So we'll do that, and I will be able to enter the discussion as well today in class, which I look forward to, actually. There might be issues that I should respond to as well. And I do so much talking normally in class. I look forward to hear some of what you have to say about what we have been through so far in the course. So it will be a little bit like the concept flipped classroom, where the students do the reading, or in this case, listen to the lecture separately, and the time in class is used for discussion. We'll see how it works out. Good, I think. And it means, obviously, that you will need to find extra time to listen to the recording later at your convenience. But there will be no class next week because there is a public holiday next Tuesday, so you will have time to catch up then. I will now share my screen. All right. I will also strongly encourage you to hurry to the Hong Kong Palace Museum in West Kowloon Cultural District very soon, because there is a fantastic exhibition. It's called Wonders of Imperial Carpets, Masterpieces from the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, which is in the Emirates, I think. But it finishes Sunday this week, so waste no time. I think the exhibition is very relevant for us, in fact, because it features carpets from Iran, from Turkey, and from India, the three Islamic empires of the early modern period, and also ceramics and metalwork and manuscripts and jades. But not only are these treasures on display, but the exhibition also makes a point of evincing the inspiration that Chinese art has given to artists in the Islamic world, and the other way around as well. So the entire first section of the exhibition is an introduction of the cultural exchanges and mutual learning between the Islamic world and China from the 7th century onwards. So that touches very much upon parts of the things that we have been talking about. You will recognize a number of phenomena if or when you visit the exhibition. I wish I could go there with you, but there is no time for me to do that. I don't think the museum would accept that either. So, but please, if you have the time, do not miss this exhibition. You won't regret it. Now, this week, I'll have to rearrange things a bit on my desktop here. There we go. Yeah. This week, we will again move in wide circles geographically from the Middle East to Byzantium and all the way to the British Isles in the northwest. And as I said in the beginning of the course, as it has turned out, the title of the course, The Art and Architecture of Medieval Europe, isn't entirely accurate, because much of what I show you is art and architecture from outside the European Christian sphere. We have even gotten so far as to China now and then. And personally, I feel that makes the course even more relevant and interesting than it would have been in the ordinary case. And it makes it global in Bonnie Cheng's sense. She's kind of the guardian angel of this course, I feel. So today we will look at quite a few mosques. Islamic art and architecture will enter the course. And I will take up the thread where I left it last week. I finished by saying a few introductory words about the emerging new religion, Islam. And I show you the Prophet Muhammad's own house in Medina, which can be said to be the first mosque, the first prayer area used by Muslims. What Muhammad established in Medina was not only a new religion, It was a new political entity, an Islamic state, or Ummah, the Islamic nation. So in Islam, religion and power was intertwined from the start. The one couldn't be separated from the other. And this was basically the case everywhere in the pre-modern world. Also in Rome and Byzantium, we've seen the same thing. Every ruler needed the support, or needed to claim the support, or even the descendants from the divine powers from the gods, to get legitimacy and to justify his power. Muhammad died in 632. His descendants, who took over the leadership of the Ummah, were called caliphs. And they undertook military campaigns to expand the Islamic territory, and they were extremely successful. Just some 30 years, in 654, some 30 years after the foundation of Islam, the caliphate extended over all of the Arabic Peninsula, over Northeast Africa, and eastwards towards the border of China. The political history of Islam is quite complicated. There are a series of competing branches and dynasties, and it would bring us much too far to go into details about that, so I won't do that. All we need to know is that the earliest descendants of Muhammad were in power for 30 years. They are called the Rashiduns, the rightly guided. And then they were replaced in 1661 by a caliph. Muawiyah was his name. He was not a descendant of Muhammad. He established a dynasty that was based on the principle of filial succession, so a family dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty, with its capital in Damascus in present-day Syria. And this new capital of the Umayyads, Damascus, of course, had to have a mosque. So the Great Mosque of Damascus was begun in 706. It still exists. It's one of the largest and oldest mosques of the world. And it was built on the site of a pre-existing Byzantine church, a Christian church. The territory was Byzantine before it was conquered by the Umayyads. And the church, in its turn, had been built on the site of an ancient Roman temple. So there is one cultic site and one religion replacing the other on this site. And to begin with, part of the then existing church was just rebuilt into prayer space for the Muslims. And this prayer space coexisted with the church for a while, but then it became too small. So a caliph named Al-Walid, he decided to demolish the cathedral in toto, and in order to make space for this new mosque. And he spared no expenses. This was to be a real grand manifestation of the new religion and of the caliphate. So according to written sources, colossal sums were spent on the construction and decoration of the mosque. This is the plan of the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. And lower right corner, you see the plan of Muhammad's house in Medina. And the difference isn't that big other than in scale. We have the great open courtyard. It's called San in both cases. And from the San, you enter the covered area, the so-called hypostyle hall. Hypostyle hall is a large area where columns carry a roof that provides shade and shelter from the sun. So hypos means under, stylos is column. So when you are in the hypostyle hall, you're under the columns, or among the columns, perhaps. This is a recurring feature of mosques, the hypostyle hall, particularly in regions with very hot and sunny climates, such as the Middle East and Africa. And this is a very simple structure, and it means that hypostyles can be added if needed to house more and more people, so the space of the mosque can, in principle, be expanded indefinitely. Now, a mosque is a place for prayer, for communal prayer. It's a religious space, obviously, but it has no altar like a Christian church or a Buddhist temple. It is a prayer hall. The focal point is not an altar, but a direction, the direction of Mecca and the Kaaba. This is where a Muslim is expected to turn himself or herself in prayer. And the orientation towards Mecca and the Kaaba is indicated by a niche. It's called mihrab, a prayer niche. And the wall where this mihrab is placed is the Qibla wall. And the photo shows you the interior as it looks today of the Umayyad Mosque with the Qibla wall and the mihrab. We can compare this to the plan of a Western or a Christian church. In the church, the direction is towards the altar. You move forward towards the altar in the further end. That's the focus of attention of everyone. But in the mosque, the faithful spread out laterally. They stand and sit and pray side by side. Muslims are required to pray 5 times daily. On Fridays, the men at least should go to the mosque for their communal prayer. And there is also an imam then who holds a sermon in the Friday prayer. He does that standing on the stairs of the minbar, which is a wooden pulpit or stairs. It's what you see on the photo. An imam who is preaching, holding a sermon on the minbar, on the stairs of the minbar. Now, in Damascus, I mentioned that there was a church, a Byzantine church, preceding the mosque on the site of the present mosque. It was dedicated to St. John the Baptist, who baptized Christ in the river of Jordan, according to the Bible. And the Bible also tells that John the Baptist was beheaded by the Jewish king Herod, so he became a martyr, one of the first proto-Christian martyrs. He had died for his faith. According to tradition, this head of St. John the Baptist had been buried at the very site of this church in Damascus, and the church contained a shrine for the head. Now, John the Baptist is actually venerated by Muslims as well as by Christians. He's respected, I should say, perhaps not venerated, but respected by Muslims. His Muslim name is Yahya. He's seen as a prophet and forerunner of Islam as well as of Christianity. So the head remained when the mosque replaced the church. There is still today a shrine for John the Baptist's head in the mosque, in the prayer hall. Originally, the walls of the prayer hall were sumptuously decorated with marble and mosaic decoration that reflected the prestige of this Caliph Al-Walid, who had it constructed. The walls were faced with marble to the height of a man's head, and then the upper sections were covered with glass and gold mosaics. This has been lost. Most of it is gone. What remains has survived on the exterior wall of the courtyard. You see a couple of sections of these surviving mosaics on the slide now. They show cities and gardens and rivers that may represent the earthly Islamic realm that had been united by the caliphs, or it could represent the paradise where pious Muslims will ultimately dwell, or perhaps both at the same time. But there are no figures depicted, neither man nor beast, and this is something that we will return to presently. The oldest of all Islamic holy structures is not a mosque, it is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. It is a sanctuary, but it's not a hall for communal prayer as a mosque. It's a place of veneration and commemoration of Muhammad's night journey. According to the Quran, Muhammad made a spiritual voyage in the spirit, where he flew from Mecca to Jerusalem on a winged horse and was then taken up to heaven, where he prayed with Abraham and Moses and Jesus and other prophets before returning again to Mecca. And inside the mosque is a huge boulder, a rock that is supposed to be the rock from whence Muhammad alighted on his spiritual journey when he was taken up to heaven. Again, there is an octagonal building. You recognize the plan of this structure. Same as the baptisteries, Christian baptisteries, and the Holy Sepulchre. The grave church of Christ also in Jerusalem, and the Dome of the Rock can be expected to enter in a kind of dialogue with the Dome of the Rock in this with the octagonal shape that kind of unites the two buildings. But the Dome of the Rock is not a baptistry, it's not a tomb, a grave building, and in the book, the octagon shape is associated with Muslim descriptions of heaven, Jannah, consisting of 8 levels and having 8 doors, and 8 angels also carry the throne of God or of Allah in heaven. So even though the connotations, the symbolic meaning of the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem may be different from, or is different, are different from the Christian octagons, the basic design is similar, with a higher central part surrounded by concentric ambulatories or passages, corridors, that are carried by columns. So you could say that Muslim and Christian architecture, in this case, mine the same sources, or for the Dome of the Rock, the Christian octagonal shrines were used as a source of inspiration. And this is nothing surprising, actually. Islam as a religion emerged very suddenly. There was no previous own tradition for what sacred sites should look like to continue. So quite naturally, Muslim builders turned to what existed from before in the region and developed and adapted previous existing shapes, forms, structures, sacred structures for their own purposes. And this is what the Christian did also when they took over the Roman basilica type for type of building for their churches. Also, Christian craftsmen were involved in the design of and the decoration of the Dome of the Rock. It's known that one of the overseers of this building project was Yazid ibn Salam. He was a Christian native of Jerusalem. The interior of the Dome of the Rock is sumptuously decorated. There is marble on the lower level, magnificent mosaics on the upper level. This is what the Umayyad mosque prayer hall in Damascus must have looked like originally. And these mosaics, they were made by East Roman Byzantine mosaic layers. They were called in from Constantinople to do this job. You have in your textbook a fairly extensive description of the decoration, particularly the inscriptions that are taken from the Quran. So I won't go much into that. But important to notice is that same as in Damascus, the mosaics contain no images of human or of animal figures. There are only vegetation, images of jewelry, symbolic objects, and abstract ornaments. And this brings us to the theme of this week, which is forbidden images. As you're probably aware, Islam is one of the religions that prohibit the use of figurative images in a religious setting. In principle, the same thing applies to Judaism, although it wasn't always followed, as we have seen. And at times, images have been forbidden also in Christian churches. And I will come to that later today. So all these 3 religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, they regard the Hebrew Bible as one of the sacred books. And there we have the second commandment on the stone tablets that God presented Moses with, that forbids the making of likenesses of all things living. So this is one reason for the evasion of figurative imagery in a religious context in Islam. And for some Muslims, the second commandment prohibition is further strengthened by the idea that God or Allah has created everything to perfection. And his creation shouldn't be rivaled. It would be improper even to try and rival the perfect creation of Allah by making figurative imagery to imitate it. But for less strict Muslims, figurative images are or were okay as long as they weren't religiously associated and remained outside the mosque. This is the interior of a palace, a royal palace in Qusayr Amra in today's Jordan. And in the reception hall of the palace and also in the baths are wall paintings. In the bath, the paintings show semi-nude women in shallow pools. They expose their bodies quite explicitly to the bystanders and to the actual beholders, obviously, in the bath too. So this is also Islamic art. The standard idea of Islam is that it is a very strict religion with regard to its attitudes towards imagery, but only abstract decoration and inscriptions and vegetative ornamentation is allowed. But the Kusaya Amra paintings remind us that this is a simplified understanding, a figurative, very vivid, animated imagery could and did exist in settings outside the sanctuary of the mosque. So this is an interesting case that is mentioned also in your textbook. It's a mosaic floor in a Christian church situated in Jordan, so in Muslim territory, you could say, St. Stephen's Church at Castron Mefa in Jordan. Jordan was part of the Islamic Caliphate, but initially, at least, the Muslims constituted just a minority, a ruling minority in the territories that they had conquered. So the majority of the population remained Christian or Jewish or Zoroastric or whatever they had been from before. And Christian churches like the Church of St. Stephen continued to exist and was even maintained. So the floor in this case was repaved in the 8th century. And the floor, the main part, the central area of the floor, has a decoration of grapes, bunches of grapes in circles. And then the border around the central area is decorated with images of cities. And these cities are mostly Christian centers of where Christian bishops, heads of the churches in the area, resided. So the images on the border is a kind of map over the Christian landscape of the area. And there are also trees and fruits and bunches of grapes and animal and human figures. But in this case, the animals and the human figures have been defaced. Look at this. To the right, there is a man rowing in a boat, but his entire upper body and head and arms have been obliterated. So the tessera, the mosaic pieces of their heads and faces have been taken out and leaving just blank areas. Why? You could ask. Because this is a Christian church, it's not a Muslim, it's not a mosque. This was a period when images were banned in the Christian East Roman Empire, which I will talk about after the break. But Jordan was not part any longer of Byzantine territory, so that couldn't be the reason. And the pavements, the figures on this pavement, this floor mosaic, were not the kinds of images anyway that the iconoclasts in the Byzantine Empire were against. So it seems that it was local Christians, the local Christians of Castron Mefa, who somehow felt that it was improper to have figurative imagery on the floor mosaic in the church. Perhaps they had adopted the Muslim rulers' antagonism towards figurative images. We have no definitive answer, but it's an interesting case of how the negative attitudes towards figurative imagery may have, in one religion, may have influenced or been adopted locally by representatives of another religion. The textbook also brings up coins to exemplify varying attitudes to figurative imagery in the Eastern Mediterranean area and the Middle East. And coins are normally not objects that art historians like myself pay very much attention to. Perhaps we should, because they are very interesting. Coins were handled by many people, everyone at least that was involved in commerce, and they were used for a variety of purposes, to pay taxes and salaries to soldiers and so on. So they were in use everywhere. They were widely circulated, had an obvious potential for visual propaganda. This was exploited by rulers. This wasn't lost on the rulers at the time. So coins gave lots of information when you look closely at them, offer lots of information. if you take a closer look at the attitude towards, among other things, imagery at the time. So the uppermost coins, these are Arabic coins. The ones on the top were issued by the Caliph Ibn al-Malik, and there is an image of himself on one side to the left of the upper image, or of a caliph at least. And on the other side is a staff that might represent Muhammad's staff. And then there is a text that encircles this Muhammad staff image. It says, "There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet." So these coins didn't necessarily belong to a religious setting, but perhaps this figurative imagery on the coins was felt by some to be a bit too provocative. So these coins of Abd al-Malik were soon replaced by another. They were the coins that were minted in the next phase had text only and no figurative imagery of any kind. And very interestingly, the same thing happened in East Rome, roughly at the same time in Byzantium. In the 690s, the Emperor Justinian II, issued gold coins with an image of Christ on one side and an image of himself on the other side, holding a staff with a cross. But this was a time when tension was building up in East Rome concerning the legitimacy of religious images, just as in Islam in the same period. So it was questioned if it was appropriate to depict God. Christ is God. Was it appropriate to depict God, who in himself is invisible and can't be reduced to any material form? So to depict Jesus, who is part of one of the persons in God, that to some was sacrilegious, it was blasphemic. So Justinian's successors, they quickly abandoned the coins with Christ's image. The coin below was issued by his successor. It has a cross, Christian symbol on one side, and the image of the successor, Leontius, on the other side. This takes me to the topic of iconoclasm, but I will save that for the second part of the lecture. I will now make a brief break.